Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Shawnti Refuge, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're a mental health coach, amongst other things, but that's kind of the crux of what we're going to be talking about today because, we live in definitely a time where mental health is challenged, I think, for all of us, not just people that were already mentally, health challenged, but, since the global shutdown and then everything post that, it seems like it's been more and more challenging to stay mentally healthy, I guess. And so this is what you do for a living. You're a mental health coach. So kind of what do you help people do?
I help people to express themselves, get things out that they're holding in because I had to learn on my own that when we hold things in, things we need to talk about, but we don't, when we hold all of that in, we're compiling it. And that years of trauma that we're
Mhm,
holding onto that we don't talk about is going to affect us in the long run.
mhm,
So my job is to, help that person to get it out before something happens. Like we all have mental health and people don't realize that we all have it.
mhm,
It's a matter of are you challenged with it or not? And when it becomes a challenge, that turns into things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, anxiety. So
mhm,
my job is to, catch you before you get to that point
mhm.
where, I can help you to get that out.
As we're visiting about this today, kind of like you said, it's kind of we'd say kind of a spectrum of ranges of clinically diagnosed
Right.
mental illness all the way up to, probably what I deal with and a lot of executives or leaders or business people deal with, which is maybe just avoidance of conflict, could be procrastination. So this is what I, do and I'm trying to get better at. But, I went through a very challenging time. And so I just started avoiding everything to protect and try to stay mentally healthy. So it was basically a soothing tactic. And so now it's kind of like, oh, okay, now I actually need to do some to-do lists and check some stuff off and be a little bit more proactive. But I got to stay in that good mental health space to do those things. So, as we talk today, it involves everybody, or even if you don't think it's affecting you currently, it probably is, but it does involve somebody more likely in your family or somebody that works for you or somebody that, maybe even your boss. Well, I mean, I
It-
think it's like over 50%. It's like
it-
70, 75%. And I think if I remember right, the statistic is like 20, 25% are on some type of antidepressants or some type
That's,
of mood
that's right.
stabilizers. And
Mhm.
so we've got at least a fourth of the adult population that are taking something. And certainly I'm not advocating that we don't take something you know, if you're on something. This show isn't saying you have to get off of it, but
No, no, not at all.
but there's underlying things that are causing you to need to take that,
Exactly.
and a lot of times medicine's supposed to be a bridge, not a lifestyle.
Exactly.
So kinda what was your story? Why did you get so interested in the mental health space?
Well, back in 2018, I don't know the exact day, but I think it was around March 2018. I woke up one day and I just was not feeling like myself.
Mhm,
And, as women, I don't know about men, but I know as women, we typically have our days where we're just not feeling it.
mhm,
And that was one of those days, but this one felt kind of different. And
mhm,
so, like, okay, I'm just in the funk. I'll get over it. I'll be better. But that funk got worse and worse and worse every day. And it was affecting my behavior. I was angry, upset, crying. It was like a cycle of those negative emotions. And I couldn't control it. Like if I would cry, I couldn't cut it off. I
mhm,
just cry, 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 cry. Or if I was mad, 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 mad. And it got worse every day. And I want to say I waited about a month
mhm,
and said, okay, all right, something's not right. So let me go see what's wrong. So I didn't know where to go because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I went to my primary care doctor,
uh-huh,
a regular old family doctor, and I told her, hey, I'm having these outbursts and I don't know what's wrong. And she said, oh, well, it sounds like you're a little depressed. Let me give you antidepressant.
right,
And so I was like, I don't want it, but I'll take it because, That's
Yeah.
that trust that you have with your doctor. They say, "Come back in 6 weeks and let me know how it worked." It didn't work. It was
Mhm.
just like taking candy. It didn't work.
Mm.
It didn't change my behavior. It didn't change my mood.
Mhm.
So when I went back, she was like, "Oh, let me give you a higher dose." I was like,
Mm.
"It's working. I don't want this," but I took it. And
Right.
weeks later, and keep in mind while I'm, taking these experimental, doses, my behaviors were getting worse and worse to where
Oh,
I felt
wow.
like I was gonna get physical.
Mm.
So at this point, my aggression was just verbal, but
Mhm.
I could actually picture myself about to get physical. And I was like, okay,
Right.
no, I can't go to jail. So I went
Right.
ahead and went back to her and I said, this isn't working. And she said, okay, well, I'm not saying something's wrong with you, but I need you to go see a psychiatrist.
Right.
I said, okay, I'll go see a psychiatrist, even though I didn't want to.
Mhm.
And I went to the psychiatrist and told her what my issue was. And she gave me antidepressants.
Really? At the psychiatry level? Wow.
She gave me antidepressants. She said, "Here, take these for 30 days and come back." And I will say it stabilized my mood.
Mhm.
However, I did not want to be on anything. I wanted to know why I was acting the way I was acting.
Right.
What I learned with antidepressants, it just, calms you.
Right.
It doesn't get to the root of why you're acting the way you're acting to begin with. And
Exactly.
that's what I wanted to find out so I could
Mhm.
fix it. And so I told her that, okay, I don't want any more of this. I want to find out what's going on. So she suggested that I go and see a therapist.
Right.
It took me my third therapist. I went through three before I found the one who was willing to help me without medication, who wanted to help me get down to the root of my issues. And she did. And
Hmm.
she introduced me to guided journaling.
Mhm.
With talk therapy and guided journaling, I was able to get to why I was acting the way I was acting, why I was so mad, why I was crying, and come to find out I had some deep seated issues going far back as childhood that
Mhm.
were never addressed.
Mhm. And s
And once I was able to, okay, yeah, I remember this and
Mhm.
start talking about it, I started feeling better.
Mhm.
It was like a literal weight lifted off of my shoulder.
Mhm.
And so, when I started the guided journaling part, she would write prompts for me and say, "Here, answer these questions." Because
Mhm.
it's intimidating when someone tells you to, "Okay, go journal about it," but you
Right.
don't know what you're supposed to be writing. So
Right.
I found that guided journaling, having actual prompts to answer, that was so helpful. So I thought to myself that, somebody else needs this because I
Mhm.
know I'm not the only person, who, you know, is going through this, but doesn't wanna be on medication. Not that I'm
Right.
saying anything is wrong.
Mhm.
Thing is, don't let medication be your first line of defense. Let it be your last.
Mhm.
Or try all these holistic measures. So I was journaling, I started doing yoga, I started doing meditation, breath work.
Mhm.
Things help me. So now I know whenever I'm having, and I still have, those days when I'm not
Mhm.
feeling myself, but I know what to do about it now.
Mhm.
Instead of just letting it move on, thinking it's gonna go away by itself because and, that's how I, came up with guided journals, and I started my business, Shawnti Refuge Journals,
Mhm.
strictly with guided journals. Each of them have different topics that, helps the person address what they need to address.
Right. So it really was the journaling that was the catalyst for you to start feeling better, but, to your point, these were specific prompts about probably your childhood or
Right?
trauma or feelings or emotions, I'm assuming?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Because,
Ex
so often, I think we do grow up and become adults, and there's really, especially our generation, probably even, people 10, 15 years younger than us, maybe even all the way down. Um, it's not like you have a class in high school or a class in college that says, "You've experienced trauma in your life, and if you don't think you've experienced trauma in your life, you've probably really experienced trauma in your life, and you're
Yeah,
suppressing your trauma so you don't
ex
remember it." If we just had a class in high school or college, probably in high school, because that way we could just knock it all out. But a class in high school to just help people understand what mental health is, but then also just the trauma. It's almost, I heard it said so well the other day, and I'm not going to remember what they said for sure. But in essence, it's like if it's kept a secret, it basically eats your lunch. Anything you're
yeah,
keeping,
it will.
even a secret from yourself. So it's like if nothing else, I mean, as I think it was a pastor at church, they were talking about just find somebody that you trust, to keep your secrets, and just, if nothing else, just tell them what's on your heart. Tell them what you experienced. Tell them the trauma you went through, because just carrying it by yourself, it's just such a heavy load. It almost instantly lightens by just
That is true.
saying it out loud. My mom passed here January 4th, so just here a couple of months ago,
Oh,
and it was a very beautiful passing. I got to see her, thank goodness, before she did pass, and we had a time to kind of say our gratitude for each other and our love for each other. And then she passed, shortly after. I was actually sharing, like, I'm in a group, and like they encourage everybody to post a video of what's going on in your life. And I didn't realize, because I really hadn't talked about it that much. But when I posted this video about my mom's passing, I was surprised that emotion came up, because even though it wasn't necessarily traumatic, it's still the passing of a parent. And I just had all this gratitude and all this thankfulness and all this just really, uh, like a deep peace and even humility about the whole process, but I didn't know it until I actually shared it. So that wasn't necessarily a trauma, but it still had this emotion that needed to express, and it needed to have a voice. And once I did, then I was just like super in a good space, because I was just like, wow, I did really honor my mother and love my mom, and she loved me in that last moment, but I hadn't really said it out loud. So I hadn't really experienced the emotion. So I was so it was a gift to share it, because I ended up and really going, wow, that was so really, really cool. But with trauma, everybody has had trauma. And I like to say real or imagined. It may have not even been real trauma. It may have just been your perception as a child that you saw an event, and
yeah,
then that event meant something in your head, and then that linked up, and so now it's a imagined trauma, but it still affects you the same way,
yeah,
because it's real inside your subconscious. It's real inside your psyche. And I've read some stuff around this, because I've studied it quite a bit. And like, I there was an instance where it was in a different country, but they rode the train a lot. And when this lady was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, her dad had, well, they were riding a train, and he kind of tossed her up in the air, and he caught her, just like parents do. But for some
yeah.
reason, they were on a train, and there was this sense that he hadn't caught her.
Mm,
And so she had this kind of deep-seated trauma around her dad wasn't safe, so men weren't safe, so the world wasn't safe, right? From, like, just that one thing of her dad throwing her up in the air and catching her, but because she remembered it differently, right?
mhm.
It meant something to, and linked up. So it wasn't even like other than that, she had a great childhood. So when we say this trauma, it doesn't have to be sexual abuse or physical
Right.
abuse or abandonment issues. It could seem, if somebody was witnessing in the moment, it could seem very minor, right?
Yes.
Or not even real, right? They see a kid not get picked for a kickball team. They're like, but for some reason in that kid's mind,
Mhm.
I'm not good enough kicks in, or
It
people don't
affects
like me, or
yeah,
I'm not good at this, I'm not good at sports, or whatever the story. And then for the rest of their lives, unless it's addressed, it just
stress,
sits
yeah,
there, right?
yeah. They start believing that, and
Right.
people a lot of people don't understand that, our thoughts don't always tell the truth.
Right. Right. Rarely.
Right.
Right.
Our thoughts lie to us. They do.
Right.
But we believe it because it's our thought. Like, why would
Yes.
I lie to myself? We have to learn, and I agree with you. I would even go as young as middle s
Right. Mhm.
about learning about, mental
Yeah.
health and your feelings and processing emotions because, yeah, our thoughts do lie to us, and we have to, determine what's the lie? Where did it come from? You have to get down in there, and a lot of us don't know how to do that by ourselves, and
Mhm.
that's where we get coaches and therapists and psychiatrists and support groups, things like that, that will help.
So I've used psychologists off and on throughout my life. So I want to be right up front. I probably have had 3 or 4 and usually it was, somewhere probably between 4 and 6 months that I visited with that person until I kind of cleared that stage, so to speak, or just kind of faded away. And then it would be maybe something else down the road or something. I often have heard of people kind of fall in this deal where they're like in therapy for 10 years with the same issue. And I'm like, that's not what
It's
that should be about, right?
true.
And I don't understand why they're in therapy for so, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with having a regular coach or a regular therapist, that's part of
Right.
your mental health. But then
Yeah,
there's also this thing where if I'm dealing with the same issue for a decade, then something's not working, right? But I'm gonna let you speak to it because this is your space.
yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. 'Cause, I was in therapy 1 year,
Uh-huh.
and then my therapist and I didn't even see it coming. She was like, "Okay, you have the tools that you need. You don't need me anymore. We need to, dissolve the relationship." And I cried like it was a breakup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
"No, don't leave me." She said, "I'm not leaving you, but you already know what you're doing, so I just need you to do it." And, we did, quarterly checkups.
Yeah. Yep.
That's, to me
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
normal.
very healthy. Yeah,
So we
yeah.
we dealt with things one situation at a time.
Got it. Yep.
I had a whole lot of stuff and we were
Right.
able to get through it, but it's a teamwork type of thing.
Yep.
And if you are in therapy for 10 years for the same issue, it's either you or your therapist is just taking your money.
Right, right, and that was my point. It's like and again, it could be very healthy to have a therapist over years if
Yeah,
it's a progression versus just, basically it's no different than taking medication. If we're not
exactly.
healing from it, then we're just trying to manage it, and maybe manage it keeps us from doing harm to ourselves or harm to others, but at some point, you got to get to the root issue,
Exactly. But
and
it
you
doesn't take 10 years to get to the root.
no. No, no, and most of the people that come on my show have had some level of trauma in their childhood, and that trauma propelled them to write books and to coach and to do public speaking and to create organizations that help other people. So, if people take that, whatever that trauma is in their childhood and lean into it, it actually can become a superpower. It
Yeah,
becomes basically the fuel, the rocket fuel that drives them forward in whatever vocation they choose, but they become more relatable, they become more, compassionate, and they want to see other people succeed in an area that they know they struggled with.
yeah,
Just like
exactly.
just like you did, right? You had this issue and you're like, "Hey, wait, there's a better way."
Yeah. Yeah, and I found that way, and now it's just about ending that stigma of, when people say, "Oh, I need help," but they're ashamed to go get it because of fear of being judged or criticized. That was me. That's why it took me a month to
Mhm.
actually go get help. It was either go get help or go to jail. Which one do
Right.
you?
And again, probably especially maybe for our generation and older, and maybe even for younger generations, but that stigma thing, I don't know where that comes from. Certainly, it's time to bring that out of the closet and into the light, right? And just say, hey, everybody is either has had some experience of taking antidepressants or had this experience as a depression, or, I had Bruce Fuller on the show, gosh, a month or two ago, and he'd written a book called Lifequakes, and basically he'd studied 500 or 600 people and found that usually 2 or 3 times throughout your adult life, you have these 4 to 5 year periods of time where you go through
Mm,
like depression, grief, anger. You feel worthless. I mean, just this kind of he called it life quake because basically it shakes up your whole life and you reset.
mhm,
Um, and I didn't realize that usually when you study it, usually takes 4 or 5 years for that to totally reset. But it's perfectly normal. And then the other thing I want to make sure we get said here today as we talk is that there is nothing that anyone listening to this or will ever listen to it is going through that someone else in the world hasn't gone through,
yes, you are
right?
not alone. Yes.
Like I know when I was in a very depressed state for an extended period of time, I withdrew
Mm,
from family and friends and coworkers. I mean, I just started closing down, closing down, closing down, closing down. And because it felt like nobody was going to understand. It felt like nobody was going through what I was going through. And I probably in that moment could have said, "Well, sure, I'm sure there's people that have," but I couldn't get there to share because I
mhm.
was closing down. So if anything, if you feel that you're closing down and you're starting to come in on yourself, that's the time that you need to find somebody to share with.
Exactly. You have to be mindful, be aware of your emotions, be
Right.
aware of your behavior. If you notice your behaviors are changing and not in a good way, it's telling you something. Your
Mhm.
your subconscious is talking to you. And listen,
Yep. Yeah, totally. And so I kind of, I'm still kind of coming out of that cycle because became so I was fairly, around people a lot, and then I went almost exact opposite extreme where I was, like, isolating and physically isolating from people other than my, family and my wife and kids. And I just started closing down. So now it's like a practice. So each week I make sure I go have lunch with somebody because I work online, I'm a virtual now. And so each week I make sure that I go have lunch with a person face to face in a real restaurant. I call somebody a friend and we set up even it doesn't matter really what we're going to talk about. I just know I need physical proximity
Yeah,
to other human beings. Um,
need it, yeah.
and then I started volunteering at a local food bank, and so I go down once a week for a couple hours, and I serve meals or I box up food, and we give that to people that typically are economically challenged, and so I find that being around that type of environment is super good for me because I'm serving, but I'm also getting to interact with other human beings. So it's become a very conscious effort of making sure that I'm out there with people, not just virtually, not just via Zoom where it's easy to disconnect, but actually
Right.
putting myself out there in the world. So if you are, and I know I've heard this from other people that work remotely, it's a challenging because it's easy to stay in your house all day,
It
right?
is.
And not go out. And then the next thing you know, you haven't been out all week and you've only talked to your wife and your kids or your spouse or your immediate family that live with you or whatever
Mhm.
roommates, whatever that is. And it's like, I don't think we weren't designed to
Be
do
alone.
that. No matter how introverted we are, that isn't healthy for us to be alone.
No, it is not. It actually, makes things worse.
Yeah.
It makes it absolutely worse because we do need human interaction outside of the internet,
Right.
outside of our home,
Yeah.
nobody, as much as you love your spouse and kids, you don't wanna look at them 24/7. You wanna, go out and be with, an old friend, make new friends, make new connection.
Yep.
That's what we're put here for.
Yes. No matter how uncomfortable that
Yep,
is,
just
it's
don't be
time.
uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. You just need to go out there, go to meetups or whatever. I mean, people with common interests or whatever, and just get out there and re-engage the world. Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Shanti, I appreciate you coming on today and talking about mental health. I think it's so probably one of the most important things that we could talk about is, your mental health and how you're processing life. And I've heard story after story after story after story of friends and people that come on this show that really in the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years, have just really struggled in that area. And, now they're kind of coming back online. I feel like there's a lot of potential in us as humanity in the next, decade or 2 decades because we have gone through this and we see kind of that the world as a whole still pretty um shaken up and in the middle of,
Yes.
all this stuff and it's election year which makes it even more controversial and just all the stuff. I'd say I also quit watching the news. I don't know about you, but
Yes,
I
I
I
did.
don't watch the news.
I quit watching the news, I quit watching reality shows,
Yep.
I quit reading, blogs, anything that did not align with the person that I am becoming or who I wanna be, I quit
Yep. Yep.
interacting.
Yeah, and I'm the same way, and even people on Facebook, if I see somebody that's
Yeah.
just posting negative stuff, I
Mhm.
just unfollow them because 'cause I'm just
Yep,
like, I just don't need if I find that it hooks me in any way to where I'm like, "Why would they?" Or if I start to, like, respond,
yep,
I'm just like, "Forget it," and I just unfriend them because 'cause I'm like, I whatever I'm gonna say isn't gonna win them over to anything, and what am I trying to win them over for anyway? It's their life, not my
exactly,
life.
exactly. You're doing it right. You
Well, I
are
don't know
doing
about
it.
that, but
Yeah, you are. You're doing it.
I'm on the path with everyone else. I'm just wanna make sure that we're sharing some good tips today, right?
You're doing it. Great job. Everything you said, that's what I tell my clients.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, you're doing it very well.
Well, I'm glad
Thank
that
you.
all those years of suffering have paid off for me. I've learned a few things about I try to
Yeah,
spend some time in silence and I do journal every day. I do spend some time for me
good
hiking every
job.
day in the silence, but that's because I've had enough time of not feeling good and not feeling the way that I wanted to feel that it was like, okay, I had to change too, right? It's not, and to your point, not just a mental thing. You got to put your body in
Yes.
places like for you, yoga, meditation,
Yeah,
breath work. I've done all of those things, and all of those things I find benefit from. It's not just I think too often, especially in the Western culture, we get in a space where we think everything's just our mind and it's all mental. It's like, no, you go work out, work your body hard, and you're not going to have as much energy to worry about stuff. You're just not. I had a really challenging hike for an hour and a half this morning. I told you earlier pre-show I got to see a bear today, which is only the first bear of the season, which was fun for me. Um, well, I was hiking, but I tell you, after you hike, I hiked for an hour and a half. It was like 100 and some flights of stairs because of the mountains. I was going up pretty steep grade, and I got down. I didn't have the energy to feel anxious or anxiety. I mean, I was just like chill, right? But
Good.
because my mental state was clear, because my physical body had like I was breathing hard, I had the
Mhm.
respiration, I was outdoors, I was in nature, so all those I had all that good vibe going for me. Had I just stayed in my car and drove to an office or drove to a coffee shop or drove back to the house and sat down on the computer and started to work, I guarantee you I wouldn't be as fired up right now as I am.
You wouldn't.
Yeah,
No.
because my energy levels would just be lower because I hadn't cleared out the stuff from the day before.
Exactly, and what people don't understand is the body keeps the score.
Exactly.
So if you are holding on to things mentally and not, doing anything to get it out, whether it's, talking, writing, physically,
Mm,
exercising, doing something, your body's gonna start telling you something's wrong. You
mhm.
know, stress, tension, spasm, all kind of things happen. And it's
Headaches,
related
right?
to yeah, and it's
Hypertension, all
related to what you're holding on to in your brain.
totally. I know, Joe Polish, he's kind of a motivation guy, but he's got this saying, or at least he quotes it. I don't know if it's his or somebody else, but he says the issues are in the tissues, right?
Yeah,
It's like the body holds on to these issues.
it does. It
And so we got to have some way to physically release them. I think journaling is probably a great way to release them in the mental space, but we
right.
also have to process them in the physical body to let
Yeah,
that let the body that's storing and I know I didn't like you said, a lot of this 15 years ago would have been like, I have no idea what you're saying, Matt, right?
right.
Because it would have been like, what do you mean the issues are in the tissues? That makes no freaking sense. But I will tell you for a fact, I've studied it enough. I've talked to enough experts in this field specifically that the body stores trauma.
It
Doesn't
does.
matter doesn't matter if we're an animal or if we're a human being, if the body experiences mental or physical trauma that is not
Mhm.
processed, it will cause disease, dis-ease in the
Yes,
body, right?
yes, it does.
There's just so many reasons to reach out for help in this mental space. And, if nothing else, you can get a hold of Shawnti at ShawntiRefuge.com. Or if you want to, you can reach out on the BriteVibe Facebook page or on the BriteVibe domain on the .com and shoot us an email. I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they're in a
Me too.
space, right? I'd be happy to talk to anybody in a space that they're like, you know what, life isn't going well. Then let's visit, let's pray, let's do whatever we need to do to get you down the road of help, right? I'm not a
Exactly.
therapist, but we
I
can
mean,
visit as human beings. And you're a
exactly.
coach, so you can go a little deeper than that.
And I'm not a therapist either, but, if we have a conversation and I sense that, okay, this is out of my,
Mhm. Yeah.
expertise, then I refer out to therapists or
Yep.
refer out to, psychiatrists. So, yeah, I mean,
Totally.
it's not hard to ask for help. It's
Yes.
about getting the right help and asking the right person.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
our
having me.
conversation. Thank you for bringing this issue to light. And yeah, I really appreciate talking about this. I think it's very good timing in the world right now.
Absolutely it is.
Thank you for being a part of the Bright Vibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.